Oh, honey, let me pull up a chair and spill this story that's been tucked away in my heart for more years than I care to count. Picture this. It's a crisp fall morning in 1942, right there in our sleepy little Nebraska town where the cornstalks whisper secrets to the wind and folks know your name before you even say it. I was just a wide-eyed girl of 15 sitting on the front porch swing, sipping Ma's weak coffee from a chipped mug, dreaming about the day I'd trade these dusty boots for something with a bit more sparkle. Life felt simple back then, even with the war raging across the ocean and ration books dictating what we could buy at the general store. Pa was out in the fields, wrestling with that old tractor that coughed more than a chain smoker, and Ma was inside humming hymns while kneading dough for biscuits that barely stretched for supper. Tommy, my big brother, he was the light of our world, 19 and full of fire, just back from enlisting with that cocky grin saying he'd whip those Japs and be home by Christmas with pockets full of souvenirs. We joke about it, him promising me a silk scarf from Tokyo and me teasing that he'd probably traded for a cold beer instead. Y'all know how brothers are always puffing up their chests like they're invincible, but darling, invincibility don't last when the telegram boy comes pedaling up our gravel drive that afternoon, his face as serious as a judge. But drops his hoe right there in the dirt and wipes his brow with a handkerchief stained from years of sweat and soil. Ma steps out, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes squinting against the sun like she senses the storm brewing before the clouds roll in. That boy, he hands over the yellow envelope with the government seal and tips his cap quick-like before hightailing it away on his bike like he's carrying the devil's own news. Pa's hands, they shake just a tad as he tears it open, and I swear the world goes quiet. The birds stop chirping, the wind holds its breath. His face crumples like wet paper, and he slumps against the porch post, mumbling, "No, God, no, not my boy." Ma snatches it, reads it aloud in a voice that's barely a whisper. Tommy killed in action somewhere in the Pacific, fighting on some island I can't even pronounce. Hero they called him, but to us he was just Tommy, the fellow who'd teach me to skip stones in the creek and sneak me candy from his pocket when Ma wasn't looking. I dropped that mug right there, coffee splattering everywhere, and ran to Pa, burying my face in his shirt that smelled of earth and tobacco. The sobs came hard and fast, racking my whole body like the thunder that'll shake our roof come tornado season. We buried him empty-handed, nobody to lay in the ground, just a flag folded neat as a pin, and a preacher talking about glory and heaven's reward. The whole town turned out, casseroles peeling up on the table and neighbors patting our backs with words that meant well but stung all the same. He was a fine boy, they'd say, gave his all for Uncle Sam. But inside our house, it was Hollow Ma staring at his empty chair, pushing food around her plate like it was Ash Pa wandering the fields at night, calling out Tommy's name to the stars like they might answer back. Me, I couldn't sleep. The creaks in the floorboards sounded like footsteps that never came. That heartbreak, it carved a hole in me deep as the Missouri River running through town, one that the years tried to fill but never quite could. And honey, it was just the starting bell, the first punch in a fight that leave me bruised and wondering if I'd ever stand tall again. But there's more twists in this yarn, secrets that bubbled up like spring water from cracked earth and tragedies that tested every ounce of grit the good Lord gave me. Stick with me, 'cause by the end you'll see how a gal like me found her way through the dark, holding on to hope like a lifeline in a storm. Nights after the funeral, I'd sit by the window watching the moon climb high over the silos, feeling that ache twist tighter in my chest. Ellie, my little sister, she was only 10, clinging to my skirt, asking why Tommy ain't coming home for Pa like he promised. I'd hug her close, whispering tall tales about him being up there watching over us, riding clouds like a cowboy on a silver stallion. But truth be told, I was scared, spitless, wondering if the war would swallow us all, living nothing but echoes in an empty farmhouse. Pa, he threw himself into work harder than ever, plowing fields that yielded less each year, the dust bowl still lingering like a bad cough. Ma, she faded, quiet like her laughter turned into sighs, and her hands idle over the washtub. One evening as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, she pulled me aside into the kitchen where the air smelled of lye soap and regret. "Sit down, child," she said, her voice cracking like dry twigs. "There's something you need to know about your brother." My heart pounded like a drum in a parade. What could be worse than him being gone? Turns out Tommy hadn't shipped out all gung-ho like he let on. He'd gotten a girl in trouble back in town, a sweet thing named Betty from the diner, and tried to dodge the draft to make it right. But the Army don't wait for love stories. They hauled him off anyway, and that telegram had hid the shame, saying he died a hero when really he was running scared in the jungle, deserting his post for a spell before getting caught in the crossfire. Ma made me swear on the family Bible to keep it buried deep no one could know. It tarnish his name and break what was left of our hearts. That secret, it hit me like a freight train, leaving me reeling with questions. Why'd he lie? Why'd life deal such a rotten hand? But I nodded, swallowed the lump in my throat, and promised, 'cause that's what you do when the world's already taken too much. From that day on, I carried that weight like an extra sack of potatoes on market day, heavy and hidden. The war dragged on, news coming over the radio, battles in far-off places, names like Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima that twisted my tongue. Folks in town, they'd rally with victory gardens, and scrap drives me pitching in by knitting socks for the boys overseas, my fingers raw from the needles. But every stamp on a letter from the front made my stomach flip, fearing it'd be Pa. Next, he was over in Europe, driving tanks through hedgerows and villages turned to rubble. Letters came sporadic, his scrawl telling me to tend the garden and watch over my words smudged like his thoughts were too. Then one came from the chaplain, not Pa, saying he'd been wounded, bad shrapnel tearing into his leg in some skirmish near the Rhine. The air lifted him stateside, but infection set him fierce and fast. The doctors couldn't save the limb or him. He passed in a hospital bed in Kansas City, whispering my name or so they said. I was 16, then hitching a ride to see him one last time, but arrived too late. Just a cold hand in a room that smelled of bleach and loss. Ma, she broke clean and two packing his things away in a trunk that gathered dust in the attic. Ellie and I, we huddled together, night sharing stories of Pa's fishing trips and his way of whittling whistles from willow branches. The farm felt like a ghost ship drifting nameless, the bank hounds circling, 'cause without Pa's strong back, we couldn't keep up. That's when the real struggling began, honey, the kind that tests your soul and makes you question if dawn will ever break again. But through it all, there was a spark, a quiet resilience bubbling up from the dirt like wildflowers after rain. Hang on, 'cause the road gets bumpier, but it leads to light, I promise you that. Growing up in that Nebraska dirt before the war really kicked in, it was like living in a postcard from simpler times, the kind you see in old magazines with kids running free and worry small as a button. I came into this world in 1927 on a sweltering August day in our farmhouse that creaked like it had stories of its own, the midwife hustling over from the neighbor's place while Pa paced the porch smoking his pipe and praying to the harvest moon. Ma always said I was born hollering like a banshee, demanding attention from the get-go, and sure enough, I was the middle child squeezed between Tommy's mischief and Ellie's baby sweetness. Our town was tiny, mind you, just a cluster of weathered barns and whitewashed houses straddling the Platte River where the water ran lazy and brown reflecting the endless sky. Folks called it Milford, but to me it was home. The place where every face wore the lines of hard work and every handshake meant you could count on him come harvest or heartache. Pa, he was a farmer through and through, rise and shine with the rooster plowing those stubborn fields that yielded corn tall as me by summer's end. He'd come in for noon dinner, sweat-streaked and grinning, scooping up Ma's potato soup with a hunk of bread, telling tales of the big sky that made a body feel small but mighty all at once. Money was tight even before the stock market tumbled in '29. The depression hitting our little patch like a drought that wouldn't quit. Pa'd stand by the radio listening to President Roosevelt's fireside chats talking about the New Deal and getting America back on its feet, his brow furrowed like he was trying to figure how to plant hope in barren soil. We'd make do with what we had, Ma turning flour sacks into dresses for me and Ellie, her needle flying fast as a hummingbird while she hummed Shenandoah to keep our spirits up. Tommy, he was the dreamer, always tinkering with Pa's tools, building slingshots from scrap wire or fashioning a kite from newsprint that'll soar higher than the church steeple. I'd tag along behind him through the alfalfa fields barefoot and wild chess and grasshoppers that hopped like they owned the prairie, or dipping toes in the creek where minnows nipped at our heels. Summers we'd pile into the back of Pa's Ford truck bumping along dirt roads to the county fair where the air smelled of cotton candy and fried dough. Pa winning a blue ribbon for his hogs and splurging on lemonade that tasted like sunshine. Winters were another story, blizzards peeling snowdrifts taller than the fence posts, us kids bundled in layers huddling by the stove while Ma read from the family Bible stories of Noah and the ark, making us feel safe as houses even as the wind rattled the shutters. But honey, the Dust Bowl came calling in the early 30s, turning our world upside down like a plow gone rogue. Folks out west had it bad too, but in Nebraska it felt personal. Those black blizzards rolling in unannounced, choking the sky till noon looked like midnight. I remember the first big one in '34. We were at school when the teacher yelled, "Head for the cellar, and we scampered like rabbits hands over mouths to keep out the grit that sifted through every crack. Pa nailed boards over the windows and stuffed towels under doors, but the dust snuck in anyway, covering the bed sheets in a fine powder that made you cough till your ribs ached. Our fields turned to wasteland, the topsoil blowing away, leaving nothing but gullies and regret. Pa standing there with his hat in hand, staring at rows of stubble that mocked his every effort. Money from crops dried up faster than a rain puddle in July. The bank sending letters about foreclosure that Ma hid in her sewing drawer like shameful secrets. Neighbors who'd shared suppers before started eyeing each other wary-like as farms went under and families packed up for California, chasing jobs in the orange groves like folks in those Steinbeck books. Pa, he wouldn't budge, said this land was in his blood deeper than any vein, but we saw the toll nights when he'd sit at the kitchen table, head in hands, counting pennies for seed that might not even sprout. Through it all, we clung to the little joys, the threads that held our family quilt together. Sunday mornings, we'd hitch up the wagon and head to church, the congregation singing Amazing Grace in voices rough as gravel but full of heart, the preacher reminding us that the Lord helps those who help themselves. After services, there'd be a potluck under the oaks, fried chicken from the Wilsons and Ma's apple cobbler that could make a stone weep. Tommy and I'd sneak off to the graveyard, visiting Grandma Stone, telling her about schoolyard scrapes or the new calf born with a white star on its forehead. Ellie, she was my shadow toddling after me with big blue eyes, asking a million questions. Why do birds fly south? Or does the river ever get tired of running? I'd make up answers half the time, pulling from Pa's stories about pioneers crossing the plains in covered wagons, facing blizzards in Buffalo, but coming out stronger on the other side. Evenings, we'd gather on the porch, Pa whittling a stick into a toy horse for Ellie, while Ma rocked in her chair, mending socks by lantern light. Those moments, they were gold pure as the wheat we hoped would grow again, teaching me early that family ain't just blood. It's the quiet ways you weather the storm together, laughing through the lean times and holding on when the world tries to shake you loose. School was a one-room deal down the road where Miss Holland taught all 8 grades with a ruler sharp as her tongue, but kind as apple pie when you needed it. I loved reading, devouring library books about far-off places like New York with its skyscrapers tall as dreams or the Grand Canyon that swallowed the sun at dusk. Tommy, he was more for numbers, figuring out how to fix the windmill when it sputtered or baling hay faster than any boy his age. But the depression, it clipped our wings. No new books or pencils, just slate boards wiped clean 100 times. Still, we learned grit from those days, showering lunches of cornbread and milk, bringing in eggs from the hen house to trade for lessons. One spring, the government sent relief checks, small but steady, helping buy fertilizer and seed that finally took root, green shoots poking through the dust like promises kept. Ma, she started a garden patch growing tomatoes, fat as your fist, and beans that climbed the poles, twisting toward the sun. We'd can them up in mason jars, stacking the pantry high against the winter, a ritual that felt like magic, turning summer's bounty into winter's salvation. Those early years, they shaped me, honey, taught me that life's not always fair, but it's what you plant in the hard ground that counts, the resilience that sprouts from nothing but faith and family. As the 30s wore on, the clouds started lifting a bit, rain coming more regular, and folks talking about jobs in the city's pie, even considering driving the tractor for the WPA building roads that connect our town to the world. But war clouds were gathering to Europe, crackling like dry tinder, and Tommy getting that faraway look in his eye, talking about joining up to see adventure. Little did we know it was gearing up to rip us apart, leaving scars deeper than any dust storm. One afternoon in 40, Tommy came home from town with enlistment papers folded in his pocket, his face set like he was heading to a hoedown, not hell. Pa argued fierce, said we needed him on the farm, but Tommy, he was firecracker stubborn, claiming it was his duty to fight for the red, white, and blue before the fight came to our door. I cried silent tears, patching his old jacket, while I watched from the barn loft, heart heavy as lead, knowing change was coming swift as a twister. That night we sat round the table, eating venison stew from a deer Pa hunted, showering laughs and stories to chase away the shadows. Tommy ruffled my hair, calling me Squirt, and promised he'd write every week, sending postcards from places I'd only read about in books. But deep down, I felt the pull of something bigger than us, a tide that'd sweep away the boyish dreams and leave us grasping for pieces. And sure enough, not long after Pearl Harbor hit, the telegram started flying, turning our peaceful early life into a memory we'd cling to like a lifeline in the coming storm. Growing up in that little Iowa town with Hank, it started out sweet as honeysuckle pie, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, leaving you swinging at shadows. We had ourselves a cozy two-room house on the edge of town, the kind with gingerbread trim that Ma would have loved, and a yard where wildflowers pushed up through the cracks like they were saying, "Hang in there, darling." Hank, he worked at the garage fixing Fords and Chevys, his grease-blackened hands gentle when he traced my cheek after a long day, calling me his lucky charm. I took a job at the Five and Dime folding overalls and ringing up candy for kids who reminded me of Ellie back home. Money was still tight, post-war folks scraping by on GI bills and factory wages, but we dreamed big, talking late into the night about saving for a place of our own, maybe even starting a family with little ones running underfoot. Sundays, we drive out to the countryside, pack a picnic of ham sandwiches and thermos coffee, watching the hawks circle, lazy-like over the fields, sharing stories of our folks and laughing at nothing much. It felt like we'd beaten the odds, me, an orphan girl, and a grease monkey making a go of it in a world trying to rebuild from the ashes. But honey, the Korean War sneaked up on us in 50 like a fox in the hen house, stealing the calm before we even knew it was there. Hank got the call-up papers one evening while we were eating beans and rice on the back stoop, his face going pale as milk under that single bulb light. "Gotta go fight the commies," he said, trying to sound brave, but I saw the fear flickering in his eyes like a candle in the wind. I begged him to appeal, said we were just getting started, but the army don't listen to tears. They shipped him off to Busan, leaving me alone in that empty house with echoes bouncing off the walls. Letters came in first full of bravado, talking about the boys in his unit and the food that tasted like shoe leather, but then they trickled to nothing, weeks stretching into months, my days a blur of worrying at the mailbox and nights staring at the ceiling, praying to whoever'd listen. Folks in town, they rallied war bonds and care packages, me knitting another scarf to send overseas, my fingers numb from more than the yarn. Then the knock came, a Western Union boy not much older than Hank, handing over the regrets of the nation, saying he was gone caught in ambush crossing the 38th parallel. No body, just a purple heart and a folded flag that I clutched till my knuckles turned white. At 23, I was a widow, honey, the war taking another piece of my soul, leaving me wandering through days like a ghost in my own skin. That loss had hollowed me out deep, but I couldn't lie down and quit, not with bills peeling up like snowdrifts and the garage job slipping away, 'cause who wants a crying woman handling tools? I sold what I could, Pa's old watch and Ma's china teapot to keep the wolves from the door, and took in sewing from neighbors, mending curtains and hems for pennies that barely covered the rent. Ellie, she wrote from back home saying to come stay, but I was stubborn-headed, needed to prove I could stand on my own 2 feet in this new world of women stepping up while the men were away or gone forever. The 50s rolled in with shiny cars and TV sets glowing in windows, but for me it was just gray days stringing one after another, working double shifts at a cannery, packing peas that blurred in my vision from unshed tears. One night in 52, I met folks at a town meeting talking about the recession-bitten hard factories laying off and bread lines forming again like it was the Depression all over. Prices climbed faster than a cat up a tree milk doubling, and gas so scarce we carpooled to church praying for relief that came slow as molasses. I scrimped on everything, boiling the same pot of soup for days, patching my soles with cardboard when the shoes wore thin, feeling that old Dust Bowl ache settling back into my bones. Through the lean times, I found a spark volunteering at the Veterans Hall, listening to stories from boys coming home with missing limbs and haunted eyes, sharing my own losses to make them feel less alone. That's where I met Clara, a sharp-tongued widow from the war, too. We'd swap shifts baking cookies for the dancers and gossiping about the latest Washington scandals, President Eisenhower promising peace, but the world's still simmering. But secrets have a way of festering like an untreated wound, and mine from Tommy bubbled up unexpected one rainy afternoon when Clara's boy Jimmy came home on leave full of questions about his pa who died in the Pacific. Over coffee, I let slip a hint about brothers running scared, and before I knew it, the whole town was whispering, saying Milford girls couldn't keep their kin straight. It stung worse than a slap, honey, old wounds ripping open with folks judging from church pews and me dodging eyes at the market. I wrote Ellie a long letter spilling the truth, begging her to help bury it deeper, but she wrote back gentle like, saying secrets eat you alive, better to face them head on. That betrayal, it felt like the ground shifting under me, leaving me questioning if I'd ever find solid earth again, isolation creeping in like fog off the river, making every shadow seem like loss. The 60s brought change big as a tidal wave, hair getting long and music blaring from radios, but for me it was the Vietnam War that twisted the knife deeper, dividing families like a plow through fresh sod. Ellie, she married a fella named Roy, a quiet type who worked the railroads, but when the draft lottery hit in '69, he got called up, leaving her with 2 little ones and a belly full of worry. I drove down to help tend the babies, changing diapers and rocking them through colic nights while Ellie paced the kitchen, listening to news reports of jungles and protests that filled the streets from coast to coast. Roy's letters came censored, blacked out lines hiding the horror, but one day a chaplain showed up at their door, hat in hand, saying he stepped on a mine near Da Nang, nothing left but memories and medals. Ellie broke like fine china, shattered across the linoleum, me holding her as the kids wailed confusing tears for bedtime stories. We buried him in the family plot next to Tommy, the flag snapping in the wind like it mocked our grief. America tearing itself apart with marches in D.C. and kids burning cards in defiance. I took the train back North Hart, heavier than a sack of feed, wondering why the wars kept coming stealing our men and leaving women to pick up the shards time after time. By the 70s, the economy tanked again. That oil crisis in '73 hitting like a hammer to the thumb prices sky high and lines at the pump stretching for miles. I was pushing 50, then working as a cook at the diner, flip burgers for truckers who grumbled about Nixon and Watergate, their wallets thinner than the patties on the grill. My savings gone to smoke, helping Ellie with the grandkids, and my own house repossessed after a bad spell of arthritis kept me from sealing steady. Folks lost jobs left and right, factories shutting down in the Rust Belt, leaving ghost towns where hope used to hum. I bunked with Clara, sharing a sagging couch and stories over instant coffee rationing the heat through blustery winters when the bill man came knocking. One brutal evening in '75 with snow pilling high and the power flickering off, I sat by candlelight feeling the weight of it all, tragedies pilling like unpaid debts. Tommy Pa Hankroy, every loss, a brick in the wall closing me in. Tears came hot and fast that night, sobbing into my apron, wondering if resilience was just a fancy word for stubborn foolery, if I'd ever catch a break, or if the struggles would drag me under for good. But darling, in that dark hour, a knock sounded at the door, a neighbor with a hot meal and a kind word cracking the gloom, just enough to let a sliver of light peek through. It wasn't the end of the hard times, not by a long shot, but it was a reminder that even in the deepest valley, there's a path up if you keep climbing one foot in front of the other. Hold tight, because the climb gets steeper, but the view from the top, it's worth every blister and tear, I swear it to you. After that cold winter night at '75 with the candle flickering like a promise in the dark, I wiped my eyes on my sleeve and thought maybe it was time to stop running from the ghosts and start dancing with them instead. Clara, she squeezed my hand over that warm pie and said, "Ethel, honey, life's too short for freezing up. We gotta thaw out and keep moving." So the next morning, I marched down to the community center where they were hearing for the senior program teaching crafts to folks my age or thereabouts. It wasn't much a room full of loopers and yarn with windows overlooking the park, but it beat sitting idle feeling sorry for myself. I started with quilting circles, sharing patterns. Ma taught me back in the Dust Bowl days, listening to stories from other widows and vets, their laughs crackling like dry leaves underfoot. Lady named Mabel, she lost her husband in Korea too. We bonded quick swapping recipes and reminiscing about the old swing dances that made your feet fly. Through her, I met the local VFW chapter helping organize fundraisers for families hit by the recession, baking pies for auctions and stuffing envelopes till my fingers cramped. It felt good, honey, pouring out what I'd bottled up, turning pain into purpose, one stitch, one story at a time. By spring, the economy started tickling awake jobs, trickling back to the factories and gas prices, easing off like a fever breaking. I got a steady gig at the library, shelving books and reading to kids after school, their little faces lighting up when I'd spin tales of prairie adventures pulling from Tommy's old yarns. Ellie, she came to visit that summer, driving up from her place in Missouri with the grandkids and told Billy and Sarah, all gangly limbs and curiosity bouncing off the seats. We spent days at the county fair just like Pa used to, cotton candy sticking to our fingers and rides, whirring under the stars, me telling about the time Tommy won a stuffed bear bigger than him. Ellie pulled me aside one evening on the porch, swinging her eyes soft, saying, "Sis, you've carried enough. Let's put that Tommy secret to rest." We wrote a letter to the local paper, anonymous like Sharon, how wars twist truths and families hide to protect but heal when they face the light. It ran small, but folks nodded at me in town. No more whispers, just understanding glances like they'd been there too. That lifting, it was like shrugging off a wet coat on a sunny day, breathing easier for the first time in decades. The '80s brought a new chapter, Reagan talking morning in America on the TV while the farms bounced back with subsidies and tech making tractors smarter than a whip. I moved in with Ellie helping raise the kids while Roy's shadow faded gentle-like into family lore. Billy, he was a Spitfire, joined the Army himself, but came home whole from Desert Storm, sending postcards that echoed Hank's old letters without the heartbreak. We celebrated his return with a big cookout rib smoking on the grill and neighbors toasting the peace that stuck this time. Sarah, she took after me, got into nursing school, driving me to my doctor visits, chattering about patients and dreams of helping folks through their storms. Through it all, I kept up the quilting, entering one at the state fair, a patchwork of fabrics from Ma's dresses, Tommy's shirt scraps, and even a bit of Hank's work shirt, the blues and reds telling my story without words. It won second place, the judge, saying it had heart, soul deep as the Mississippi, and for the first time, I felt like my struggles weren't just burdens, they were threads weaving something beautiful, something whole. But honey, the real turning point came in '92 when Ellie got sick, cancer creeping in quiet like a thief in the garden. The doctors shook their heads, talked treatments that cost more than we had, nights in the hospital with beeps and tubes stealing her color. I sat by her bed holding her hand frail as a bird's wing, praying fierce as I did for Pa back in the war, whispering, "You ain't going yet, we got more stories to tell." The community rallied bake sales and car washes, folks who'd known us forever pitching in to cover the bills, one evening as the sun set gold over the fields. Ellie squeezed my fingers, tears in her eyes, and said, "Ethel, remember that reunion we dreamed of after all the losses?" Turns out her old friend from school tracked down Roy's brother from Vietnam days, a fella named Jack, who'd lost touch but heard about the family through the grapevine. He showed up at the hospital door, grizzled and grinning, with a duffel of photos and letters from Roy, tales of brotherhood in the jungle that made Ellie laugh through the pain. It was like piecing together a quilt long torn, the three of us talking till dawn, sharing laughs and tears over shared grief that bonded us tighter than blood. Jack stayed on helping with chores and driving us to chemo, his stories filling the house with life, Ellie gaining strength from the connection like a flower turning to the sun. She beat it, that round remission coming swift as summer rain, and we celebrated with a family picnic under the old oak tree toast to second chances and the folks who show up when you need them most. As the 90s rolled into the new millennium, the Great Recession hit in '08 like a twister, touching down, uninvited banks failing and jobs vanishing overnight. Ellie and I, we were retired by then, living on Social Security and pensions that stretched thin as pulled taffy houses foreclosing left and right, reminding me of the Dust Bowl all over again. Billy lost his plant job driving trucks cross-country to make ends meet, Sarah juggling shifts at the clinic with her own kids facing daycare costs that pinched hard. I rallied the old quilting group, turning our circles into support, meet swapping coupons and job leads over tea, the room buzzing with ideas instead of just gripes. One gal suggested the community garden on the empty lot, by church planting rows of veggies to share and sell at markets, the dirt under our nails a balm for worried hearts. It took off bountiful as eating tomatoes and squash peeling high enough to feed the food bank and put cash in pockets. Through it, I reconnected with Jack, he and Ellie marrying quiet-like in the backyard with me as witness, their vows simple as homemade bread, promising to weather whatever storms came next. The recession dragged, but we held firm family dinners twice a week, no matter the budget, stories flowing like the river, keeping spirits afloat. That resilience, it bloomed full in those years, honey, turning us from survivors to thrivers, building bridges over the losses with hands joined and hearts open. And darling, as I look back on it now, sitting here in this rocker with the grandkids at my knee, I see how each struggle led to this resolution, a life patched together, stronger for the tears and tougher for the trials. It's proof that hope ain't just wishing, it's rolling up your sleeves and finding the light in the folks around you one day, one kindness at a time. Looking back now from this old rocker on the porch where the evening breeze carries the scent of fresh-cut hay and distant rain, I can't help but marvel at the road. That's brought me here at 98 years young with more wrinkles than a crumpled road map, but a heart still beating steady as a metronome. Honey, life's been a wild ride full of dips deeper than the Grand Canyon and climbs steeper than the Rockies. But through it all, I've learned that the real treasures ain't the shiny things you chase. There's the quiet moments that stitch your soul back together when it frays at the edges. All those heartbreaks, Tommy's secrets slipping like sand through my fingers, Pa's letters cut short by shrapnel, Hank's flag folded neat on my lap, Roy's mind that echoed like thunder. They could have sunk me like a stone in the Platte, but instead they taught me resilience ain't born from easy days. It's forged in the fire of losing what you love most and choosing to. Rise anyway. Y'all think strength means never crying or never doubting, but darling, I cried rivers enough to fill the Missouri and doubted the good Lord more times than I can count yet. Here I am wiser for the wear, knowing that vulnerability is the crack where the light gets in, just like those wildflowers pushing through concrete after a storm. And oh, the secrets, they's like weeds in a garden. If you let them grow unchecked, they choke out everything green and good. Carrying Tommy's truth all those years it weighed on me, heavier than a harvest load, twisting my gut at family gatherings and making me short with folks who meant well. But when Ellie and I finally let it out into the light, sharing it gentle like without the shame, it didn't destroy us. No, sir, it freed us like birds slipping from a cage. The whispers turned to hugs, and the judgments to hugs, and the judgments to Me Too stories round the quilting table. Life's full of those hidden burdens, the ones we bury to protect our own or our kin's memory. But honey, I've come to see that honesty, even the hard kind, it's the balm that heals the deepest cuts. It don't make the pain vanish, but it shares the load, lightens the yoke, so you can breathe again and laugh at the absurdity of it all. Now, when the grandkids come around with their questions about the old days, I tell them straight, no sugarcoating, because the truth is the best legacy you can leave, a compass pointing true through the fog of what ifs and maybes. Wars, there's the great thief stealing not just lives, but the innocence of whole generations, living empty chairs and what if dreams hanging in the air like smoke from a battlefield. From Pearl Harbor to the jungles of Vietnam and beyond, I've watched America pour her boys into the fray, coming home changed or not coming home at all, and each time it carves a piece from the nation's heart. But in the reflecting, I see the flip side, the way those conflicts wove us, tighter communities rallying with bonds and gardens, letters crossing oceans like lifelines, reminding us we're all in the same boat rocking on the same stormy sea. Take the recession in '08, it hit like the Dust Bowl's meaner cousin, foreclosing dreams and stretching pantries thin, but folks didn't scatter, no. They banded together, planting community plots and trading skills like it was the old days before gadgets took over. That's the hopeful thread running through my yarn. America ain't perfect, she's bruised and battered, but she's got a backbone of grit that bends, but don't break, turning tragedies into triumphs, one neighborly act at a time. And darling, if there's one lesson from all my wandering, it's that resilience is contagious. When you share your scars, folks see their own reflected and find the courage to keep going too. Family, though, that's the anchor, the true north that pulls you back when the winds howl fiercest. Los and Ma so young, leaving Ellie and me to navigate the rapids alone. It could have splintered us, but instead it glued us closer than sap on a pine tree, sisters sharing secrets and sorrows through letters and long-distance calls till we were more like one soul split in two. Then the kids, Billy with his trucker's tales and Sarah's healing hands, they brought light back into the house, filling the empty spots with laughter and chaos, the good kind that makes you forget the quiet nights of wondering if you'd ever feel whole again. Jack coming into our lives late like a surprise package from heaven. He didn't replace Roy, no, but he added layers to our story, showing that love don't run out, it multiplies when you open the door. Now with great grandbabies toddling around, pulling at my apron strings, I see the cycle complete, the heartbreaks handing down, not as curses, but as wisdom tales of how to weather the gale and come out dancing. Family ain't always the ones you're born to, it's the ones who choose you day after day, sticking through the mud and the muck, cause blood's thicker than water, but love's thicker still. Peeking back over the decades, I reckon the biggest revelation is that hope is not some fragile bird you coax to your hand. No, it's a fire you stoke with every choice to get up after falling, to reach out when you'd rather hide, to forgive when the hurt screams loudest. There were days black as midnight when I thought the darkness would swallow me whole. After Hank's telegram or Ellie's diagnosis, the weight pressing down till breathing hurt, but each time a small spark appeared, a neighbor's pie, a child's hug, a letter from afar reminded me I wasn't alone. That's the profound truth. Honey, life's tragedies, there's not the end of the story, there's the plot twists that make the resolution sweeter, the kind where you look round at 98 and see a life rich with meaning, not despite the losses, but because of them. We've all got our battles, the wars within and without, the secrets that simmer and the struggles that scar, but hold on to this. If you can find one reason to keep planting, one hand to hold one dawn to greet, the resilience follows like a faithful dog. It's what got me through the telegrams and the recessions, the dust and the douse, turning an orphan farm girl into a grandma with stories worth telling. So as the sun dips low painted, the sky in hues of peach and lavender, I sit here content as a cat in cream, knowing I've lived a life full of color, even when it was mostly grays. The world's changed, electric cars zipping silent and phones smarter than a whip, but the heart of it, the human part, that's as steady as ever beating to the rhythm of kindness and comeback. If my tale's tugged at your heartstrings like it does mine, every time I revisit it, then do me a favor, share it with someone you hold dear, a friend facing their own storm, or a kin needing a nudge toward hope. Let's keep these stories alive, y'all. Pass them down like heirlooms so the next generation knows they ain't alone in the fight, that resilience is our birthright, woven into the fabric of this great land from the prairies to the cities. Drop a comment below. Tell me about your own grandma's wisdom or the heartbreak that made you stronger. I'd love to hear it, and who knows, maybe it'll spark a light for someone else scrolling through on a tough day. Thanks for listening, honey. May your path be lit with the same quiet hope that's carried me this far. God bless, and keep on keeping on.